Welcome to the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. If you want effective and actionable tips to simplify the overwhelm of launching and managing your podcast, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Verity Songon, podcast manager, launch strategist, and host of a Top 100 podcast. I'm really excited to have you here, so without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. Welcome back to all of our lovely listeners who join us every episode or have joined us before for previous episodes. And also welcome if this is the first episode that you've ever joined in with the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. I feel like that title is so long sometimes, but anyway, it still works. I still love it. But yes, if you are new, if you are a veteran of the podcast, welcome back. Either way, it is amazing to have you here. Today for this episode, I thought it would be actually a little bit fun to, rather than go into anything too technical, just be talking about kind of like a podcasting history, podcasting 101, and just really take it back to basics. The reason I thought this would be a fun episode to put together as well is because I actually bumped into somebody outside the supermarket. It was a couple of months ago now. And she was like, "Oh, how are you? Haven't seen you in ages. What is it that you're doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm basically into podcasting now." She was like, "What the heck's a podcast?" And I was like, "Oh, there's still people who don't know what a podcast is." And then it kind of got me thinking, like, what is the actual definition of what a podcast is and why they're called podcasts? So me being me, I looked it up basically, and I delved into a bit of history of podcasts. So yeah, let's dive into this. But what I want to do first of all is actually take you back to 2004. If anybody remembers 2004 at all, it was a different time. It was an interesting time, and I was in secondary school. And I remember iPods coming out. I don't know if you remember iPods. They were much thicker than they are now. Does anyone even have an iPod anymore? I've got a very small iPod, which I have in the car, which has got like, oh my gosh, I haven't updated it since probably about 2000 and I don't know what, but it is so much fun because it's just got like all of my old songs on it. But iPods had only just been released. They still had like, the tracker wheel. Oh, they were amazing. Loved them. But I remember I didn't have an iPod, I have to say. My dad asked me for my birthday that year if I wanted one of these new things called an iPod. And I remember just being like, what the heck is that? No, like, I've got a Discman. Why the heck do I want an iPod? Like, that's never going to catch on. Yeah, clearly I did not know what I was talking about whatsoever. But anyway, and I remember somebody at school having the iPod, and we were like, oh my God, that's so cool. And she had on it, there was obviously this thing on the menu called podcast, which we just skipped past because we were just like, what the hell is a podcast? And I remember just not having a clue what a podcast was and just ignoring it basically. And then I remember MP3s got a little bit bigger, so I got a Creative Zen. If you've never heard of Creative Zen, that's absolutely fine. I looked it up on Wikipedia and they're now discontinued. You can't buy a Creative Zen, but I remember thinking I was really rebellious for getting a Creative Zen MP3 player as opposed to getting an Apple iPod. And I think my 14, 15-year-old self would now look at me and be like, oh my God, because I've just got like Apple everything. But, cue the eye roll. In fact, I might have been a little bit older than that, but anyway, cue the eye roll, whatever. So I was not convinced back in the day that this podcast thing, whatever it was going to ever take off. I couldn't understand the point, to be quite honest with you. I had CDs, mini disc players had come and gone. They'd tried to take off. You had the radio. Like, what was the point in podcasts? And I just think that's hilarious because fast forward to 2020, I was setting up and hosting my own podcast, Confident CEO. And in 2023, here I am with not only that show, but also this show, the Lazy Girl's Guide to Podcasting. So I just found it really hilarious that something that when I first heard about podcasting, I thought that's never going to take off. And now that is literally what I do. I seem to just live and breathe podcasting. But, here we are. I also never thought that skinny jeans would take off, and they're literally all I wear now. So again, clearly I'm no good at predicting trends. But since 2004, when podcasts first appeared on iPods, they have become obviously increasingly popular. And so I wanted to, kind of dive back, as I said at the beginning of this, and really look at what is a podcast. We've now got all these podcast directories popping up left, right, and centre. We have got YouTube YouTube Music that is now doing podcasts as well. We can listen to podcasts. Diary of a CEO is now on BBC iPlayer. So there is so many ways to listen to podcasts now and to interact with different podcasts, which I just think is really, really exciting for the podcasting industry, and just shows how far it has come since its days of inception, basically. Podcasting as well, what I think is great is that podcast is something that can be produced by individuals and organizations, and often hosted by experts or enthusiasts in their respective fields. And I just think this is great, because you don't need to be a seasoned radio DJ to produce your own podcast. I'm producing this one, or I'm recording this one right now, using a Blue Yeti microphone plugged into an iPhone, using the free version of the Riverside app. That's all I'm using to record this particular episode. So, it kind of gone are the days when to create this kind of content, you need this expensive setup, or you have to hire out a studio. I'm literally doing this on a Sunday afternoon in my home office. And when I say home office, please don't think that it's anything overly grand. It's just like, how a lot of 1940s builds have got like a little box room? It's literally one of those, but it sounds so much better to call it home office, doesn't it? But anyway, I'm digressing there. To pull out some numbers, it's estimated that there are between 3 and 4 million podcasts available as of May 2023. And in comparison, there are approximately 114 million YouTube channels. So when people start saying, podcasting's so oversaturated, everyone's got podcasts these days, actually, no, they don't. 3 to 4 million podcasts compared to over 114 million YouTube channels. No. The market is not saturated. Believe me, it really, really is not. Now, a lot of people still don't necessarily understand exactly how podcasts work. So podcasts work by creating and publishing audio content that can be accessed by listeners on demand. So in short, you record your podcast and you edit the audio file, you put it on a podcast hosting platform, and then that is distributed by the RSS feed across to different podcast directories and platforms. People can subscribe to the podcast and receive new episodes automatically as they are released. And the great thing about podcasts as well is that no longer are they only available on an iPod, where you have to have downloaded it beforehand through the iPod plugged into your computer. You can now stream them, download them, listen to them wherever you go on a whole range of devices. So, like I said, teenage me, who didn't think they were going to catch on, clearly knew nothing. If you're listening to this episode, I'm guessing that either you are just kind of caught up in the moment of listening to all of the episodes and you've already got a podcast, or you are somebody who is tuning in because you don't have a podcast and you might be thinking that you want to start one. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, can anyone start a podcast? And the answer is 100% absolutely yes. All you need fundamentally to start a podcast is a topic that you are passionate about, some very basic equipment like a microphone, recording software. And I said that I'm recording this episode just using a Blue Yeti microphone, and also the free Riverside app on my iPhone. I'll get that linked in the show notes below so you can have a look at that. And a platform to host and distribute your podcast. And podcast hosting platforms, yes, you can pay for them, but there are also free options out there as well. It's just about finding what suits you. And whilst it can take time and effort to build an audience, podcasting is a great way to share your ideas and content with others who share your interests. And if you are thinking of getting into podcasts, then I would check out my webpage, veritysongon.com/freebies, where I have got some fantastic freebies to help you start, create, and grow your podcast. So first of all, I have got a free webinar, which is called Podcasting, How to Get Your Business Heard. But even if you're not podcasting from a business point of view, this is a really good way of laying the ground for your podcast and figuring out how to start your podcasting journey. I have also got the podcast launch checklist and episode planner, which is a free downloadable PDF. And then once you're up and going and you want to grow your podcast, I've also got the 5-day email challenge to increase your podcast audience. So all of those 100% free, and they are all available at veritysongon.com/freebies, and all three of those are linked down in the show notes. So do check those out. Remember as well that starting a podcast is way easier than a lot of people think. As I said, you need to choose a topic that you are passionate about and that you think will resonate with your target audience. Get some basic equipment in place, and really it's about just starting recording and promoting and having fun. That's the most important thing, is really just having fun. I would recommend as well just binging all of these different episodes, because I go into so many different topics on this podcast. I just, like I said, for something that I never thought would take off, it's amazing how I talk about podcasting literally all the time now. So yeah, that was my diving into a kind of podcasting 101 really. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have been podcasting for some time, do let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. When you first heard of podcasting, was it way back in the day when it came out, or was it more recently? What got you into podcasting? When you first heard of podcasting, did you ever think it would take off? I'd be really intrigued to know that as well. And if you are thinking of starting your podcast, then I would love to hear from you as well. So do reach out at VeritySongOn on Twitter or Instagram. I'd love